Who's to blame for World War II? Well, it's fairly easy to blame Adolf Hitler as the man that led to a Second World War in 1939. Hitler's aims were fairly aggressive from the very beginning. He stated them openly in his book Mein Kampf. And they can be broken down into three parts. One, destroy the Treaty of Versailles. Now, there he would have had a lot of sympathisers in Britain, America, Canada, Australia, even France, because the Treaty of Versailles was considered to be unfair for a number of different reasons. One was that the Treaty of Versailles had said that people should be allowed to vote to say which country they belong to. So if you were a French speaker living in Germany, you should be allowed to vote to leave Germany and go to France. And that sort of thing happened. But what the Treaty of Versailles didn't allow was people who were German speakers to vote to become part of Germany. It took huge amounts of territory away from Germany. There were many German people who were kept out of the German nation. Added to that, there were many German speakers living in places like Italy, Russia, spread all around the globe, who were never given any say over which country they belonged to. So the Treaty of Versailles was considered to be particularly unfair by many people around the globe. So destroying the Treaty of Versailles, a lot of people in Germany and outside of Germany actually would have agreed with them. And this is one of the reasons that the British government pursued the policy of appeasement, because at the end of the day, this particular war aim seemed almost reasonable. Secondly, he wanted to create a greater Germany, a country of all the German-speaking people. Now, again, that seemed to be part of destroying the Treaty of Versailles. But that would have worried the Allies because that country would have been huge. Would have had huge economic power. You have to remember in World War I, Germany, practically on its own, because its allies were useless, had fought Britain, France and Russia to a standstill. It took the intervention of America in 1917 to defeat the German people. So a greater Germany, which would have been even larger than the Germany which had fought World War I, was going to be a huge problem for Europe. So once you destroy the Treaty of Versailles and you move on to creating a greater Germany, you're heading towards war again. Third, and this was the clincher, was the whole idea of Lebensraum. And that was the idea to conquer land for Germany in Eastern Europe. Now, he was quite clear about this. He wanted to move to the east. He wanted to conquer Russia. He wanted to basically turn the Slavs of Russia and countries nearby into a sort of a slave people for the German people. Seems very brutal to our minds, but you have to remember at this time, Britain owned an empire where it treated people of a different colour, of a different ethnicity to whites as inferior. And it owned territory in Africa, it owned territory in Asia, and the French as well owned an empire, and they were particularly brutal to the people that they governed, particularly in places like Vietnam. So Germany was essentially saying, we want to be a great power too, and if Britain can push about the people of its empire, and if France can push about the people belonging to its empire, well, Germany should be allowed an empire too. So that was essentially what Hitler was saying was only fair. Between 1933 and 1935, Hitler began to rearm. There had been a rearmament was part of the 1919 Paris Peace Conference, and it was agreed that all countries would disarm. The only country that was forced to do so was Germany. And the logic behind that was, well, if Germany is forced to have a very small army, well then Britain and France won't need to have very big armies. They'll be able to keep their armies quite small. And that therefore will mean that there's less soldiers out there, and if there's less soldiers, there's a small likelihood of war. So that was the idea behind making the German army as small as 100,000 soldiers. Hitler decided that no, enough was enough there. He wanted to go to war and he needed a large army, but what he was able to argue was, well, look, none of the other great powers have disarmed. France has not disarmed. Britain has not disarmed. Disarmament isn't happening, and this whole system that you've set up is unfair. So therefore, Germany is going to rearm. And he removed Germany from the World Disarmament Conference and from the League of Nations. Now, he was also very careful. He made sure that as he was doing that, he was signing a non-aggression pact with Poland. He did that in January 1934. So he's, on the one hand, he looks warlike. He's rebuilding his army. But on the other hand, what he's doing is he's saying, look, it's only fair Why should Germany be treated differently than anybody else? And he's also saying, look, I want to make peace. And he's over making peace with Poland. Germany continued to rearm secretly throughout the Weimar years. So Hitler wasn't the only guy who decided that the German army should be made bigger. So Weimar politicians before Hitler, the guys before Hitler, had also very, very quietly rearmed. But Hitler decided to speed this up significantly. He told the Navy to begin to construct new vessels. The Navy was banned from building battleships. So what Hitler did is he built what were called pocket battleships. They were as small as a cruiser, but they carried just as many guns as a large battleship. He told the Air Force to expand rapidly, and in 1935 he announced conscription. Conscription basically is telling everybody of a certain age that you have to join the army. So you're told you're joining. You don't volunteer. You're not a professional soldier. You're just forced to join. You're trained for a few years. You go back into the workforce, but it means if there's ever a war, you've got a large body of trained soldiers in your country. And a large army was essential to winning wars. Well, all of those actions broke the Treaty of Versailles, constructing new naval vessels, creating an air force,